Hi, how you guys doing? I'm Nick Fanton and I'm your video game expert. We will be discussing how violent video games cause violent behavior in adolescents. I hope you enjoy my subtle sarcasm. Please feel free to ask any questions or express your opinion in the comment section. Just know if your opinion refutes mine, it is wrong. Defeating an epic boss, finally getting through that hard level, or being an axe-wielding dwarf who is on a quest to obtain secrets hidden beneath an elaborate dungeon, these are the feelings expressed that, in all likelihood, can only be experienced through the wonder of video games. I've experienced all the wonderment that can emerge from a good game, the feeling of euphoria when you're entering luscious virtual landscape, riddled with foreign species and unanswered secrets like no other. Who wouldn't want to partake in an elaborate journey similar to an interactive movie? This is a question I surely do not have the answer for. However, for whatever reason, I'm assuming stroke of insanity, some people entirely detest the virtual world. There are many anti-video game arguments frontlining the debate, some of which are matters of personal taste, others of which use as excuses for modern violence and other heated issues like proliferation of obesity. Much like Virtual Self, the brave warrior who backs down from no challenge, I entirely refute any idea that insists video games are innately negative. Primarily, there is the debate that violent video games like Call of Duty and Grand Theft Auto subsequently lead to manifestation of uncontrolled violence in kids and teens that play them. Consequently, the same disbelievers argue that such video games are responsible for uncontrollable acts or violence that teens and children commit. Now, although intended to be humorous memes rather than a scholarly debate, I once stumbled across an entirely relevant picture on the internet. In a nutshell, the situation of a mother talking to her son who was playing a video game was depicted. The conversation went something to the tune of this. The mother asks, "Son, you would never kill anyone like you do in a video game, would you?" In response, the son says, "Of course not, Mom. There's no leaderboards or trophies. Anyways, if I did, I'd have to put pants on." Also, there is the argument that video game violence desensitizes kids to violence and essentially normalizes it. It is so they think that it is okay. Ferguson, San Miguel, Garza, and Jared Beck of Texas A&M performed a study which showed video games had little to no effect on teenagers' reactions to violence, and that, in fact, factors such as teenagers' depression, personality traits, and family violence are responsible for all their violence. Although I was one of those kids who were never allowed to play Grand Theft Auto or Call of Duty at a young age, I have plenty of friends who were. In fact, those are some of my most docile friends. For example, one of my friends who, when he was younger, would only sit at home and play Grand Theft Auto or Call of Duty, I kid you not, that was seriously almost all he ever did. On the weekends, he would play Halo, Call of Duty, Grand Theft Auto, all those first-person shooters. This same friend, now in his late teens, has never been prone to violence, and is actually quite timid. In this case, someone who is constantly subjected to one of the most violent video games of its time, at a young age, has never had an inclination towards real-world violence. Because of this, it makes no sense to assert that violent video games are independently responsible for violent things teenagers do. Then there's the argument that video games are dumbing down today's youth. Do I look dumb to you? I don't think so. For the more dramatic, uncultured mothers standing up to the plate are a plague on the education of our children. This argument I have a personal problem with. From about 4th to 7th grade, I've spent most of my time playing RuneScape, an MMORPG, massively multiplayer online role-playing game, where the player is set in medieval times. The player can do anything from smith a helmet to farm a crop. In 5th grade, my class took a field trip to Mumford, a reenactment town of the old ages. See, this is where I first realized everything I played in RuneScape taught me much more than I could ever learn in a setting at school. I knew the process of how to fletch an arrow, I knew the ore combination to make bronze, I even knew the best type of wood to use for a bow. All of this material I was supposed to learn in an educational institutional setting. I learned from a video game I played in my free time. Would you look at that? Moreover, even at a young age, I like to play war games like Medal of Honor, which took place in actual historical battles in places like World War II and World War I. In these kinds of games, I was a soldier on the front line, reliving immensely important historical battles in a virtual world. Because of this, I knew more about the timeline events during both World Wars than any of my classmates. And that was before even setting foot in a classroom. I learned more about every war from the Civil War to the Cold War, from video games than I ever did from a history class that my teacher was trying to teach. Besides things like fine motor skills and hand-eye coordination, there is an immense wealth of knowledge to be accessed through video games. Jose and Miriam, members of Department of Science and Philosophy at Huluva University in Spain, performed a study and came to subsequent conclusion which supports the use of video games and promote better educational methods. In fact, the vast majority of my teachers I had during middle school believed me to be an avid reader, based on all the information I had already been subjected to when, in actuality, I had only fully read one book at the time, and that was Orp Goes to the Hoop. Well, unless you count Dr. Seuss, but I wouldn't. They're not even remotely educational. Because of this, I find it entirely fair to make the argument that video games can teach a young person worthwhile information, as much so as a book or time in a classroom. Equally as important and incorrect is the argument that video games detach kids from the outside world and beauty of the nature and friends. A study performed by Boyce, Standing, Burrich, and Keller of the University of Houston showed that the video games have no significant effect on the development of social skills or extracurricular activities. As I previously made an account of, as kids, my friends and I played plenty of video games. Also, however, we spent plenty of time outside. In fact, the video games we played gave us archetypes to use from when we were playing outside in the woods. Like pretending to be on quests with a mighty sword, my friends and I ran around town, and we came up with plenty of games. We'd have water gun fights, and we'd do all normal outside things kids are expected to do, while still finding time to go inside and beat a level on a video game. The digital world never barred us from the outside world. It is my experience, and that of my friends, that video games can actually lead to a far more vivid imagination and lead to some pretty interesting days outside in the woods. We were, and still are, avid gamers, yet, on multiple accounts, we would opt out and spend time outside rather than inside playing games. The point lies within the experience. Video games have no intrinsic capacity to bar kids from being outside and enjoying the real world. Lastly, the reoccurring concern that video games destroy imaginations. Yet again, I entirely disagree with this approach. If anything, video games foster the growth of child's imagination. Being able to experience alternative dimensions, personalities, and characters opens a child's mind up to a plethora of new possibilities. Video games are not a substitute for imagination. They are an extension. Sure, a video game removes the need for a child to create the environment, but one also has to consider that the children have to integrate themselves into the world and affiliate themselves with an alternative universe full of new ideas and alternative concepts. Essentially, a video game is an interactive movie, a book with video clips. Sure, there are plenty of articles online that prove violent video games cause violent behavior in adolescents, but the fact of the matter is, in all actuality, you cannot prove violent video games are what is causing this violence unless you conduct an unbiased study where the control group and the experimental group have the exact same life, with the only difference being the amount of violent video games they are exposed to. In the United States, this kind of study is unconstitutional, therefore it will not happen. Considering we are in America, we are innocent until proven guilty. Good luck proving us guilty, you anti-video game activists. Please excuse me while I go play video games and continue not being violent. Goodbye.